Donald Trump is the hero of the QAnon following.
He's actually like a Christ-like figure who will save the country and save the world.
Trump is part of the Q team. From what we understand, Q Plus is his handle, and he does a lot of posts, and he's part of this.
That's how some self-described followers of the conspiracy group QAnon describe both their, quote, movement and President Trump's role in it. Now, they're devoted to Trump. They show up at the rallies, they show up parades, they show up to protest Democrats holding signs and wearing shirts that support Q, and some, they have done far worse, including when a gunman with an assault weapon walked into a D.C. pizza place and fired once as he went looking for a non-existent basement where he was told top Democrats were holding teens as sex slaves. That's just one of the conspiracy theories put forward by Q. And for all their love of Trump, Trump seems to be loving QAnon right back. According to Media Matters, Trump, he's amplified QAnon Twitter accounts more than 185 times as president from 114 different Q accounts. As Politico notes, that's a lot more than just winking at the conspiracy group. It full-on supports it. And the political influence of QAnon is actually growing. There are 14 candidates who unbelievably have won their primaries and will be on ballots for House and Senate races this fall, all of whom claim to be supporters of QAnon. And we now know that multiple reports are out there that QAnon is becoming more of a presence in Europe as conspiracy theorists there merge some QAnon rhetoric into their own politics. Now, if you're like me, you've probably heard something about the group and their ardent backing of Trump, but you've also probably been wondering, what the hell is QAnon and where did these guys come from? Well, it all revolves around an anonymous figure named Q who posts on social media, and QAnon followers are convinced that Q has access to the highest levels of government. Q makes predictions, drops hints, sort of a modern-day political conspiracy Nostradamus. Most, they're connected to claims of a deep state, a phrase we've heard from Steve Bannon before we even heard from Q, and that deep state is controlled by political elites, business leaders, and Hollywood celebrities, all of whom followers think are active pedophiles who hate Trump. I'm not making this up. Now, what they believe is actually even crazier. That U.S. media outlets receive an email at 4 a.m. every day, trust me, I don't, that gives us orders on what stories we should cover. That JFK Jr. did not die in a plane crash. That online retailer Wayfair is a front for trafficking of children, and that Hillary Clinton would be arrested in late 2017. So how did this modern tinfoil hat group come about here and be a presence in national politics? And is Donald Trump the first QAnon president? And just how far would they actually go to try to keep him in office? For that, we turn to Angelo Carusone. He's the president and CEO of Media Matters, and he has been tracking this group closer than just about anybody. You know, Angelo, I'll admit it's taken me a long time to get to the point where I even wanted to give these guys oxygen, but I think in retrospect, I made a mistake because yes, they're fringe. Yes, they're crazy. Yes, you got to have your head examined to even give any credence to this, but it's not the point. A lot of people do. A lot of people on the ballot adhere to this, and even the president is pushing this out there, and more media outlets are giving it oxygen as well. So denying it is just ignoring not reality, but at least what's out there. This is much bigger than I've given it credit for, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think a lot of people are coming to that realization now, and it's understandable because, to your point, it is it is traditionally and should be viewed as a fringe movement. The one thing that's changed, though, partly because of social media, partly because of what Trump represents, is that power is being organized on the fringes these days. And to that point, there were 67 congressional candidates that ran this cycle. That were QAnon believers or advocates. 13 of them are already on the ballot in November. All of them are on the Republican side.
This isn't some one-time wink and a nod from the president. I think you said 185 times he has either promoted or acknowledged something that QAnon's put out there.
185 times on his Twitter account. And what I think sort of lines up neatly with just how much power they've been able to amass in a short period of time is 90 of those retweets. So about half of them have come in the last 4 months. So he's picked up steam in terms of promoting and advocating and giving oxygen to QAnon advocates.
But what I don't get is this, Angelo. Listen, fine. You told me 4 years ago he's pushing this kind of a thing, and maybe some of America didn't know who Trump was. But after 3.5 years, nobody doesn't think that a guy capable of lying 18,000 times, whatever the latest tally is working to uproot the deep state here and is working hand in hand with Robert Mueller. You might as well be on Mars. How does his embrace of this, or the very concept of legitimacy of something like this, still carry weight? I guess once bitten, but twice shy, right?
Sure, and I think that's what makes the QAnon sort of phenomenon so concerning, is that their ability to not just deny reality, but to bend it in a way so that it actually reinforces their conspiracy theories. And so every time it feels like there's some major moment that completely contradicts or undermines the very thing that QAnon believes in, which is that Trump is out there sort of, breaking down all these barriers and going after all these child sex trafficking rings, they take the latest evidence as just further proof that Trump is on the right track, and that it's all smoke and mirrors. And even recently, they've been, saying every time they point out that Trump hasn't done enough, they say, well, you just don't understand the ninth dimensional chess that Trump is playing. So I think that is what gives it staying power, actually, is that it is so incredibly elastic. And now, you're going to have QAnon advocates that are going to be roaming the halls of Congress, which means it's not going away, regardless of what happens to Donald Trump.
And it's being abetted by certain elements of the media, and I'm not just talking about on chat rooms by people sitting in their basement. You have Fox News has pushed this stuff. Of course, One American Network, Sinclair on their stations and broadcast, they've pushed this stuff as well. And only when guys like you call them out on it do sometimes, and I stress the word sometimes, do they disavow it, but they seem to just keep going back to the well.
Right. They might disavow a little bit, especially when there's a lot of pressure. They'll say, oh, well, QAnon, we don't totally subscribe to QAnon. But on the other hand, they'll say, they are on to something. And I think the part that we should drill in on is that's something, because at its core, and this is what to me makes the QAnon phenomenon so scary and concerning, is that they really believe, or they say, that they are on the side of justice, that they are the only thing that is stopping or slowing down Democrats, the deep state, and the media from running this massive child sex trafficking operations, which they argue is either for selfish sexual pleasures or also because they're interdimensional demons that are trying to feed off of the children's psychic energy. And I say that with a straight face, and it sounds so ridiculous, but a very, very large component of the QAnon really does believe that these are demons that are feeding on these children for psychic energy, that Democrats and the media are actually interdimensional demons. And when that happens, you really believe that anything is justified. And so a lot of the violence that we've seen connected to QAnon is precisely because the person finally believes that the only option they have left is to take matters into their own hands. And that's a really scary combination in a country that's already on the edge, that has a lot of guns and a lot of people that believe this.
Well, and that's is why I got to the point where I'm like, you got to talk about this, and that people remember Pizzagate or remember with a nut showed up with a gun, and thankfully nobody got hurt. But I didn't realize, Angelo, how many other incidents, not just people who consume this, but have decided to act on it, to the point where the FBI is calling them a terrorist threat here. But explain, there are multiple examples where people did exactly what you said. They're taking things into their own hands. People have gotten killed consequently, all attached to this. I don't know what you call it, but all attached to this.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there have been some incidents that should have been really high profile. One QAnon advocate blocked the Hoover Dam with his truck, and was armed, threatening to basically kill people because the Democrats and the media weren't taking it seriously enough to save the children. Another law enforcement broke up a massive they thwarted what was going to be a pretty significant attack. The QAnon advocate was not only heavily armed, but had bombs in his trucks and was going to basically blow up a bunch of places. There have been beatings, shootings, stabbings, all connected to QAnon. And really at its core, what if you really think about the fuel, it's that you believe the ends justify the means. When they interviewed that guy who went to that pizza place in DC, the Pizzagate person, he was saying he genuinely believed that there was children being trapped in the basement there and that nobody was doing anything about it. And so he argued his motives were true and pure, that he believed it was essential, and he was willing to sacrifice himself to save what he thought were a bunch of kids being trapped. And that's how a lot of these Q advocates feel. They, I don't want to just chalk it up to mental illness. There's a lot there. It's not just that. That's too easy and not fair. A lot of it is that both they're rotten, but they're also a lot of it is that they really believe that they are righteous. And when you have a righteous cause and weapons, bad things happen. And I think that's, to your point, why more people need to take this seriously, because this is a growing movement that the president himself is stoking, that is only gaining steam and is now going to gain a lot more legitimacy when more people in office, when there are more people in office that are adherents to it.
Very disturbing stuff. Angela, I appreciate a few minutes. Thank you so much. Up next, he's supposed to be the nation's top law enforcement official, but ever since taking office, Attorney General Bill Barr, he's been a lightning rod, and many say much worse, working for the president, not the American people. The search for justice, that's next.